show you some things that I don't think you even knew existed. It goes against everything Manifest Destiny teaches about Native Americans. And I want you to know this part of our history because people erased it. And we'll get to that later on in the program. Erased it intentionally. Erased it intentionally. That's an important part of it.
From the book Christopher Columbus and the Participation of the Jews in the Spanish and Portuguese Discoveries by Dr. M. Kaiser Lane. This was written in 1894. And we're in chapter 6 here. It says, among the explorers' companions whose names have come down to us, the complete list is lost, according to them, right? They don't want us to know who was there. There were several men of Jewish stock. For example, Luis de Torres, again, here we go. Luis de Torres, right? Remember, he was the interpreter. It says, a Jew who had occupied a position under the governor of Murcia and who was baptized shortly before Columbus sailed. As he understood Hebrew, Chaldee, and some Arabic, Columbus employed him as interpreter. Again, another source, as interpreter. So they knew they were going to the old world. So he brought this person, Luis de Torres, just in case, because he knew many languages, but especially Hebrew, because we'll see later that Columbus was looking for the Grand Khan or the Prester John, right? This is from the book The Secret Archives of the Vatican by Maria Luisa Ambrosini. You can get this in Barnes & Noble. Alright, and this was a hard book to get. I had to take a screenshot of every page. It was only on loan. And so it says here, greater than Europe and Africa. The popes had been collecting Hebrew codices since Avignon times. And while the count of a voyage a quarter of the way around the world is an odd thing to find in the records of a desert people, there is. So they're saying that the Vatican and these popes had documents and codices going back, Hebrew codices, stating that how they traveled the world, right? How they had lands far away, right? It says, and they call them desert people, but we know they weren't all desert people. There is, when one comes to think of it, a surprising frequency of reference to the sea and its islands in biblical writings, a reflection of desert man's longing for water, or an unacknowledged heritage from the Phoenicians. The document, if it existed, has disappeared, according to them, right? It may be in one of the bundles of unclassified documents in the Miscellanea, and it probably definitely is. It may have been destroyed in the sack of Rome in the next century, or the cosmographer friend may simply have given it to Pinzon, who would have had no trouble getting it retranslated in Spain, from which Jews had not yet been evicted. The fact that Columbus took with him on his first voyage an interpreter, again, who was converted Jew and skilled in Hebrew, though he knew only a little Arabic, suggests that he may have attached importance to the legend. All right, so even the Vatican and these people studying these records in the Vatican let you know that Columbus brought this Hebrew interpreter for a reason. He believed in something. All right, just like he wrote that he was going to go recover the holy city and Mount Zion, right? A fragment of supporting evidence comes from paleobotany. The same variety of cotton was being cultivated both in Peru and in the Indus Valley in 2500 BC. Alright, so here we go again. Peru, right? Peru. So they're saying that we had cotton, right? We were making cotton, growing it, making clothing, right? In Peru, in the same time as the Indus Valley. This is the true old world. We've seen before that the oldest pyramids are over here, the mummies, this is Atlantis. So we can see that, they're always trying to match something old that happened over here to something in the other side of the world. Right? But we know this is the true old world, right? So let's continue. It says, since cottonseed is killed by seawater, this may be an indication of intercontinental contact somewhere back in the megalithic age that seems less and less primitive the more we learn about it. The great names of the past crowded around the discovery of America. So it says again, the great names of the past crowded around the discovery of America. As ancient writings newly printed were searched for evidence and opinion. Columbus studied Ptolemy, Aristotle, and Pliny. So you see Columbus studying these people because these people are the ones with the legends, right, of Atlantis, like Plato and all these other people. So these same people studied Plato, because in other accounts, Columbus is said to be actually a Greek, and his name is different than Christopher Columbus, if he is a real person. Right? We're going to get to that, but as you can see, there's a lot of Greek influence here, and the Greeks are the ones who wrote about Atlantis, right, or America. He had a copy of Pope Aeneas Silvius' Historia Rerum Ubique Gestarum. The Pope had modestly planned a universal history and geography, and had completed the section on Asia. He read Esdras, the prophet of the Apocrypha, and was inclined to believe him because St. Ambrose and St. Augustine had thought highly of him. Also, Esdras told Columbus what he wanted to hear. His estimate of the Earth's relative proportion of land and water made it seem that the Atlantic would be conveniently narrow. So you see how they're talking about Esdras, right? And we also know that in the book of Esdras is when they talk about the Assyrian captivity and how the lost tribes, right, decided to flee into the wilderness, right? They separated, right? So continuing, even Prince Henry the Navigator in his research Institute of Sagres found some of his inspiration and motivation in legend. All right, so all these legends they had in Europe and West Africa is really stories of old, of Atlantis or / America, or the old India, or the third Ethiopia, right? The route around Africa was to lead not only to the prosperity of Oriental trade, but to the kingdom of Prester John. Again, Prester John, aka King David, aka the Grand Khan, or Wan Khan, into the gardens of the high point of the world. Alright, so we just want to go back to this book, Christopher Columbus and the participation of the Jews in Cuba, Hispaniola, and the other islands which he discovered. Columbus found natives who had their caciques and their own language and traditions. To what race did these aborigines of America belong? Several writers have asserted to have displayed much learning in attempting to prove that the aborigines were descendants of the Jews. Okay, so, alright, so we've been taking this journey, you know, if you've seen the Hebrew copper-colored aboriginals video that I made, and relating to all the accounts that have basically come from the past, of these early settlers, colonists, pilgrims, believing and writing in their accounts that they had found the lost tribes in America, you know, and if we know that this is the old world, then they actually found the old world, so they found the tribes that originally were in the old world, right, or what they have put in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and so-called Bible lands. Alright, so as you can see, Columbus was also trying to understand this. That's why he brought a Hebrew interpreter with Luis de Torres, so he can speak Hebrew, not the Jewish Yiddish of today, Assyrian mixture, but Paleo Hebrew, which is vibrational, aboriginal to the Americas. That's why they found in New Mexico those lunar stones, which is written in Paleo Hebrew. They gave it a date of at least 500 to 2,000 years ago. Study that. So let's continue. It says, this result was reached already in the 16th century by the Spanish clergyman Roldan. His arguments were derived from an unpublished manuscript which he discovered in the library of San Pablo in Seville. Montesinos, who possessed the manuscript of Luis Lopez, the learned bishop of Quito, that's in Ecuador, was convinced that the Peruvians were of Jewish origin. The Peruvians. And where do we say the city of David was? I just told you, Cusco, Peru. Where is the oldest pyramids in the world? In Peru, Caral Sucre, and just many others in South America. And where's the oldest mummies found? Chile, Peru. Alright, so where are the real cradles of civilization? So again, the Bishop of Quito was convinced that Peruvians were of Jewish origin. The view of Roldan and Gregorio Garcia that the aborigines of America were descendants of the Jews was maintained with many arguments in one and the same year, 1650, independently by the Englishman Thorogood and by the Portuguese Jew Manasseh ben Israel, a renowned rabbi of Amsterdam who induced Cromwell to allow the Jews to return to England. A Portuguese Marrano, here we go again, another Marrano of Villaflor, who, strange to say, also called himself Montesinos and afterwards assumed the name Aaron Levi, informed Manasseh that he had mingled in South America with Jews of the 10 tribes. Manasseh's book attracted much attention and was translated into Latin, Spanish, Dutch, English, Italian, and Hebrew. And we read a little bit of this book in the other videos that I made, and so we're also going to go back into it in future videos. Alright, so it says, nor has interest in it ceased even at the present day. One more interest than the mode of migration is the question whether any analogies in language, in traditions, in religious conceptions, or in religious ceremonies justify the acceptance of this ethnological theory. Roldan's chief argument in support of his view is the language of the Indians in Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, and the adjoining islands. He contends that it has many resemblances to Hebrew. Again, Roldan's chief argument in support of his view in the language of the Indians in Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, and the adjoining islands, he contends that it has many resemblances to Hebrew. In fact, he even calls it a corrupted Hebrew. Yes, because he doesn't understand the ancient Picto symbol Hebrew, vibrational, right? It's not about words or religion. So, for example, let's take a look at the word Hebrew, right? It's etymology. All right, I don't know if you saw my other videos talking about Eber, right? So it says here in etymology dictionary for the word Hebrew, it says late Old English from Old French Hebrew, Hebrew, from Latin Hebreus, from Greek Hebraeus, from Aramaic Semitic Ibra. You see that? Ibra. Corresponding to Hebrew, Ibri, and the Israelite, traditionally from an ancestral name Eber. So that's one of the sons of on the line of Shem, but probably literally one from the other side. So really, Hebrew is basically saying, meaning he is one from the other side. Perhaps in reference to the river Euphrates, or perhaps simply signifying immigrant from Eber, region on the other or opposite side. So, are you living in the region, on the other region or the opposite side? From a European's perspective, is that where America is, on the opposite side of Europe and Africa? Yes, right? So, one from the other side, Hebrew, Israelite. So all the different meanings, but really it goes down to basically being one from the other side. So Eber, again, the region beyond. If you remember Ibra, which means a pinion. So we remember again Ibra, right? Ibra, which means a pinion. And a pinion is basically a feather. Yes, a feather. Ibra. Its root etymology, foundational meaning is feather. Ibra. Who holds feathers to be important and sacred? Who dresses with feathers? It says here, word study feathers and wings. The word here for feathers is Ibra, which is often associated with the feathers of a dove, although I have found it used to reference the feathers of an ostrich or eagle. So as it says here, it says Psalms 91:4, he shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. A little bit down, it says, it is interesting that this word ebra for feathers comes from the Semitic word eber, Semitic, Shem, which means the feathers of a dove. However, it is rooted in the Akkadian word abaru, which is the word for being firm, fixed, strong, immovable. Jewish sages apply this word for the idea of covering for protection. So using feathers as a covering for protection. Again, it's opinion, which is a feather. And so Ibra, we get Hebrew, and we also get Abra, Ibrahim, Ibrahim. We get Hebrew, Eber, or Ibra, which is feathers. Ibrahim. So Abraham is related to feathers as well. So when they're talking about Abraham, who were they really talking about in the ancient Paleo Hebrew? Were they just talking about a priest king over here on this side, a chief, cacique, katzin, a katzin, katzinke? And continues regarding Roldan. He asserts that such names as Cuba and Haiti are Hebrew, and that they were first applied by the earliest caciques, the chiefs or leaders, Kasim. Alright, we're going to see what he means by that, Kasim, who discovered and peopled the islands. The names of rivers and persons, islands, the names of rivers and of persons in use among the natives are derived from the Hebrew. For example, hyena from the Hebrew ain, stream, Jones from Jonah, Jaque from Jacob, Ures from Urias, Siabao from Siba, Maisi from Moisi. The names of their tools, of their little canoes or kansas, the name Akshi for pepper, the name of the storehouse for maize, grain, and the like, all point to the Hebrew language. Right? Their rites and ceremonies, as well as their language, form one of the main arguments in favor of this theory of descent. Circumcision prevailed among the Indians. They often bathed in rivers and streams. They refrained from touching the dead and from tasting blood. They had definite fast days. Marriage with sister-in-law was permitted if they were childless widows. Wives were discarded for new helpmates. They also sacrificed first fruits on high mountains and under shady trees. They had temples and carried a holy ark before them in time of war. Okay, so they had temples and carried a holy ark before them in time of war. They were also like the 10 tribes, including to idol worship, and according to him, idol worship, what he thought of the 10 tribes. All writers and travelers agree, moreover, that there were many Jewish types of faiths among the Indian, the aborigines of America. So again, just want to bring you back to the word that he mentioned as katzin or katzike. He was saying katzike comes from katzin. What is katzin? How do you say chief in Hebrew? And I was able to find this, which is katzin, right? And you can see the phonetic spelling katzin, katzin, with a K, katzin. In the West Indies and the Spanish countries, the chiefs are called cacique. Katzin, katsi, ke, katzinki, katzike, katzin, very similar. Again, it says he asserts that such names of Cuba and Haiti are Hebrew and that they were first applied by the earliest caciques, katsi, the chiefs or leaders, katzin. Katzin, again, is Hebrew. Again, katzin means chief or ruler. Same thing as in Arawak language, Taino language, right? Cacique, because cacique is a Taino or Arawak word. So what are the Arawak really speaking, who came from South America, right? We're telling you that the ancient Jerusalem was over there in South America, in Peru. The Arawak came from South America before they landed in the West Indies, and their word for chief, ruler, is the same as Hebrew, katzink, katzinke, katzin. It's the same. So why did Columbus bring in a Hebrew interpreter? Well, he knew why. Again, he wrote he was coming to conquer or take over the holy city and Mount Sinai for the king and queen of Spain. All right, just a quick reminder of something we mentioned before, and so you can see as well again. And we have here letters of William Penn, right? The founder of Pennsylvania. It says here, a letter from William Penn, proprietary and governor of Pennsylvania in America, to the Committee of the Free Society of Traders. All right. And recently, Darkman read this out to everybody. Just wanted to remind one part here as well. Who we talking about, right? When we're talking about, so-called Indians, right? And it says here, as William Penn told us, as the natives I shall consider their persons, language, manners, religion, and government with my sense of their original. For their persons they are generally tall, straight, well-built, and of singular proportion. They tread strong and clever, and mostly walk with a lofty chin. Of complexion, black, right, or dark skin, black. But by design as the gypsies in England. Gypsy, was that just another word for Egyptian, gypsy, Egyptian? But we're talking about the original that came from here. Ancient Egypt was over here. All right. So yeah, it does look like the ancient gypsies of England, because they were talking about red Indians. If you read Ancient Britons, another book, it'll tell you who the gypsies are. They called them red Indians. They greased themselves with bear's fat, clarified, and using no defense against the sun or weather. Their skins must need be swarthy. All right, so since they don't use no sunblock or anything like that, their skin needs to be swarthy or dark skin, so they could be protected, right, with the melanin. All right, so swarthy is, again, dark skin, black, dark complexion, swarthy. Now just focus on the bottom. We're talking about Hebrew stuff, right? And he also said here in the bottom, as you can see, it says their language is lofty yet narrow, but like the Hebrew. But like what? Like the Hebrew. We're talking about the Lenape Delaware tribe he was amongst. All right, this is the treaty he did with them, famous painting. All right, he's saying that their language is like the Hebrew. Now remember, what did we learn about Hebrew? Those from the other side, Ibra, feathers up, right? Those who are from the other side, those from beyond the Euphrates, those who crossed, the immigrants, right? All right, so it's not just like a religion. All right, so insignification, full, like shorthand and writing. One word serveth for in place of three, and the rest are supplied by the understanding of the hearer. Imperfect in their tenses, wanting in their moods, participle adverbs, conjunctions, interjections. I have made it my business to understand it, that I might not want an interpreter on any occasion. And I might say that I know not a language spoken in Europe that has words of more sweetness or greatness and accent and emphasis than theirs. All right, like the Hebrew. William Penn. All right, so real quick, because we're talking about William Penn, and we're in this other book, which is called An Authentic History of Lancaster County in the State of Pennsylvania by J.I. Mombert, D.D., member of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. This is written in 1869. All right, so I just want to show you that this is recorded here as well, that he said that the natives, again, were of complexion black, but by design like the gypsies, and their skin must need be swarthy. All right, just wanted to show you. And again, their language is lofty yet narrow, but like the Hebrew. So you can see this is actually recorded, authentic history. All right, but I want to show you one more thing. So we're on page 68 of the same book, Authentic History of Lancaster County in the state of Pennsylvania. And again, they're reading off William Penn's letters and notes. And he says here, it says note number 26, it says, for their original, I am ready to believe them of the Jewish race, or Hebrew, right? Hebrew, those from the other side, the feathers, Ibra, Eber. All right, I mean of the stock of the 10 tribes. And he don't just mean any kind of Jewish, right? Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Canaanite, Moabite, Ishmaelite, he don't mean all the Jewish race. He just means the stock of the 10 tribes, the lost 10 tribes, Israelites. But this is not all. They agree in rights. So their rights as well. They reckon by moons. They offer their first fruits.
right? They have a kind of Feast of Tabernacles, and the Feast of Tabernacles, all right, that's the real Thanksgiving, the Feast of Tabernacles. They are said to lay their altar upon 12 stones. They're mourning a year, customs of women, with many other things that do not now occur. All right, so William Penn is letting you know he knows they are of the Israelite or of the 10 lost tribe stock. All right, the Lenape Delaware Indians he encountered.
From the book Israelite and Indian, A Parallel in Planes of Culture. Address of Garrick Mallory, Vice President, Section H of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Toronto meeting, August 1889. Alright, this is an address from Garrick Mallory, Vice President of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Gary says, many authors have contended that the North American Indians were descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Prominent among them was James Adair, whose work highly useful with regard to the customs of the southeastern Indians, among whom he spent many years, was mainly devoted to proof of the proposition. So we do have a book from James Adair, and we're going to go into it later. The Reverend Ethan Smith is also conspicuous, and even the last book discussing the Indians published last year, bearing the comprehensive title The American Indian, favors the same theory. The authors of the school mentioned have for their excuse the fact, which I freely admit with greater emphasis, that an outstanding number of customs of the North American Indians are the same as those recorded of the ancient Hebrews, but the lesson to be derived from the parallel between the Indians and the Israelites is very different from that of a descent advocated. This book, Israelite and Indian, A Parallel in Planes of Culture. This was an address given by Garrick Mallory, Vice President, Section H of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, delivered at the Toronto meeting in 1889. The history and records of the Israelites must be chiefly considered regarding the times before they had formed a nationality and had become sedentary. Nearly contemporaneous with the nationality was the general use of writing, and it would appear that the Arab, in never having acquired a written language, their stage at the Columbian discovery, allowing for the differences among themselves, shows a degree of development similar to that of the Israelite patriarchal period in the early Canaanite occupation before the rule of kings. Alright? The argument strongly urged derived from an alleged similarity between the Hebrew and some Indian languages, especially in identity of some vocables, is not to be considered. Perhaps the most absurd of all the coincidences insisted upon by Adair was the religious use of sounds represented by him to be the same as the word Jehovah, or as we know, Jehovah or Hawa, as the deported Israelites did not pronounce the name given in English version as Jehovah, and we know that V was a W back in Paleo Hebrew, so it's Jehovah mostly, and the Y and J, wasn't really there, so we go talking about Jehovah, Hawa. And the mode of its spelling and pronunciation is at this moment in dispute, like I just said. The mode of its spelling and pronunciation at this moment is in dispute until today is still in dispute. Hawa. Generally given as Have, it would be very remarkable if the tribes of Indians supposed to be descendants of the lost tribes of Israel should at this time know how to pronounce a name which their alleged ancestors did not possess, or at least did not use. All right.
Let me show you one more connection. In 1860, David Wyrick, he's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks. He was digging into a mound near those earthworks, and he found a wooden coffin made of oak. They opened up the coffin and found a skeleton of a man holding a little box that was about 8.10 inches in size. The box had been cemented shut here. This, by the way, is sitting in Ohio. Well, he opened up the box and he found a little man inside, a little black stone. They took it to scholars and they looked at it. The man seems to be carrying something, and there's writing here at first they couldn't recognize. The writing is, they thought in 1860, some sort of Hebrew. Well, finally, about 20 years later, they found some rabbis living in the area, and the rabbis looked at that, and they could read it. They said it was an old kind of block Hebrew, and it was a rendition of the Ten Commandments. Now, this is another piece. Block Hebrew. They said they'd never seen anything like it. Mainstream archaeologists at the time called this a hoax. But then in 1900, or just about after 1900, in Israel, they found the same block-style Hebrew writing. Mainstream archaeologists still dismissed the findings. They found it in Israel, and they found it in Ohio. But there was another stone that they found that they couldn't argue. This is the Bat Creek stone. It was found during the course of an official Smithsonian evacuation. The Smithsonian didn't understand the meaning of the writing on the stone. They thought it was Cherokee, since it came from Cherokee country. They didn't realize that it's actually Hebrew. They had published this originally upside down. They threw it in a box at the bottom of the Smithsonian, put it in the basement. Many years later, a scholar took it out of the box, looked at it, and went, oh my gosh, it's upside down. It's Phoenician, ancient Hebrew. So what's going on here? What is that about? Where is that history? I'll show you in a few minutes, and we're going to have a conversation, and I'm going to show you some more things that the Smithsonian, science, government, commerce colluded to erase.
people.